All right, I will call this meeting to order for the Community Development Committee on September 6th at 6:01. And let's go ahead and record the attendance. We have Councilmember Lassay, Councilmember Mayhew, and myself, Councilmember Johnson here, or Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew. I always forget which way it's supposed to be recorded. Anyway, and that takes us to the approval of the agenda. If there's any objection to approving the agenda, please say so now. And if not, we will consider the agenda approved. And that brings us to public comments. Let's take a peek at the attendees. I don't see anyone here in the council chambers or online, but if any members of the staff want to say anything, I guess they're technically legally allowed to. All right, not seeing anyone step forward. And that will take us to the minutes from one of our recent meetings. It's been that long, July 18th. At least that's what's before us. Any corrections, my fellow council members, to the minutes from July 18th? Let me pull up the participant list here. Hang on. Yes, Councilmember Lassay.
Yes, I just like to note, and I believe I was absent from this meeting, but I would have appreciated a excused absence.
Did we not excuse?
At least it's on the minutes, but
Yeah, can staff just double check to see?
We can listen to the tape and double check that.
Okay, can we retroactively excuse? Is there anything saying that we can't retroactively excuse? Okay, well, just in case, does any motion?
Move to excuse.
I'll second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, just in case.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Lassay.
Apologies. We'll correct the minutes and finalize them for you with that addition.
Great. And with that, does it have to come back to us technically, or can we just?
If that's the only change, I just suggest we can make it. You as chair can review it when we bring it back to you specifically. And
okay, thank you. Any other changes?
Okay. We can approve it subject to that change.
Okay, then unless, Councilmember Lassay, you still have your hand up.
no, that's all good. I don't have any other edits to the minutes.
Okay, then without objection, we'll approve with that change. All right. Then we can move down to the agenda bills. Let's see, there's the Conservation Futures Interlocal Agreement. So does staff have a presentation?
yes, thank you. Jason Rogers, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department at the City of Snoqualmie. What you have in front of you tonight, council members, is an agenda bill that would authorize execution of an interlocal cooperation agreement with King County for the Conservation Futures Program. This program provides money for the city to acquire, in our specific case, riverfront properties. This is a program we participated in for a number of years. King County, the CFT program, has been a great partner over that time in providing funding resources for us to buy properties. So you can see this one would be for this interlocal agreement would be for $550,000 in funds. There is a 50% max requirement to use these. We have that max budgeted in the CIP. You'll see under the, I can scroll down here. Under the budget impacts, we have a CIP and budget allocation, including city funding of $320,000. So we have more than the 50% match. I should also point out that we do have other funding sources we use to acquire riverfront properties, with the flood control district being one example. So this is not the sole source of money we use to buy properties. And so we would be using this to continue our longstanding purchase of those river properties. We've acquired most of them over the last decade or so. There are roughly a half dozen or so left that are still on our list. And so we're asking for the council to approve the interlocal agreement by resolution.
Questions or comments from the council? Yes, from the committee.
Yeah, I'm just curious. In the past, my understanding was we've always completely funded the match with other grant funds. As I read this, I was confused as to whether that was the case now.
It is the case here that we are funding the match with other grant funds. What you see then under the budget impacts there is because, we will essentially intake grant funds and then the budget allocation is to then expend the funds. It counts toward the city's match, even though we're using other grant funds from other sources. But for conservation futures, that works perfectly fine.
So for what it's worth, that's how I thought it worked. And so that's great. I think you could clarify that, and I recommend you do clarify that. I was actually thinking we needed to make a motion to specifically require that, but if that's what's happening, if you just maybe clarify that in the write-up, I think then it's, because obviously that's what's happening, then it eliminates that question.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Other questions from the committee?
Actually, I have one more question.
Yeah.
So I take it this was something we applied for? We apply for this every so often, I take it?
This isn't something we applied for. We have an existing agreement that is coming to its expiration. And so King County and the city are interested in simply renewing the agreement. So it wasn't an application or a competitive one so much as we want to continue the partnership.
So I just wanted to compliment staff. This is a fantastic program. It's making a huge difference on the river reach, the riverfront there, and continuing to participate in this. Just, I think, kudos to staff and administration for keeping this going.
Thank you. Councilmember Lassay, I saw you unmuted. Do you have something to add or a question?
No, I was going to mention the same thing that Councilor Mayhew did. And it's been a revolving item for the time that I've been on council. It's come up every year. So.
Okay, great. Then, so the question would be, let's see. So would this require a first and second reading at council?
No, this is a resolution.
Okay.
And so it requires just a single reading.
Okay. So then the question is this something that should go on the consent agenda or on the regular agenda? Considering the brevity of the discussion here, I'm inclined to think this could go on to the consent agenda, but I'm of course interested in hearing what you all think. So Councilmember Lassay.
I'm with the revision that Councilmember Mayhew suggested in terms of updating the budget statement to include that the funds are coming from other sources of grant money. With that revision, I don't have any objection to having on consent.
I concur.
All right, then let's go ahead and put that on the consent agenda. And I believe that's the end of that one, unless there's any other comments.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, staff. Okay. Then with that, we are into regular business. I met with the community development director a couple of times over the last month or so about sort of how we want to progress both with the new leadership in the administration. Good idea. In the administration with new council members. I think almost half of the planning commission is new. So, we've got a lot of new folks, and we had a process for how we went about doing things when I was the chair of the planning commission. And the question was, is that how we want to continue doing business? Is there a better way of doing it? We also wanted to discuss actually getting to the crafting of some of our priorities and turning them into whether they're agenda bills or resolutions, whatever they are, so that we can actually do stuff rather than just having it as, here's a thing the council would like to do, and then never getting to it, right? We're at a point where we can actually start doing things, which is awesome. So that's another thing that's under the regular business. And then also the meeting time and frequency, both for this committee and for the planning commission. So those are kind of the three big things that we discussed in fairly broad terms. But let's go ahead and start off with the workflow. So the way that we used to do things and the way that we can continue to, or we can amend, is that the Community Development Committee, sometimes at the direction of the whole council or sometimes on their own, would come up with a topic of some sort for whatever reason that they want to explore further. Give the example of the fence regulations. There's an issue where someone put up a fence that caused some traffic flow disturbances, I'll put it that way, also opening up the opportunity to not only talk about the safety of fences, but also for the aesthetics, especially in the downtown historic district. So the Community Development Committee said, hey, you know, we want to explore this further in both those things in terms of safety and the appearance. So let's have the Planning Commission discuss this a whole bunch, come up with a set of proposals for what we could change, and then it would come back to the Community Development Committee. So the Planning Commission did that over the course of a number of months. We then sent, when I was there, that's why I say we, the Planning Commission then sent that set of recommendations back to the Community Development Committee, which reviewed them and then said, okay, we like these, maybe not so much these, but go ahead and take this information. And now we think you're ready to go ahead and start crafting a set of code amendments. Those then went back to the Planning Commission to craft code amendments into code language, which took another several months to occur. It came back to Community Development Committee at that point. When the Community Development Committee reviewed that set of recommendations in code language, it was then passed on to the full council for approval. So that's the way that things at least used to work. And the question is that the most efficient way to do things, or is there some part of that process that we can amend? I believe that one thing that we could do is we could consider taking a set of ideas that we would like the Planning Commission to work on and telling them, go forth and not only come up with a list of proposals, but go ahead and take that step to turn it into code language rather than it coming back to Community Development Committee for a check before going back to Planning Commission to turn into code language. So essentially allowing for the possibility of removing one of those steps in the process. So that was one proposal on the table, but I'd like to hear what the committee both thinks about the original way that we did things when I was on the Planning Commission, that new idea for removing that step, and any other ideas for streamlining workflow or not. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
So I think I never understood what you just described to be a sort of required process. So I definitely think I would encourage us to just streamline things. You know, the folks on Planning Commission put in a lot of time on things, and if they're ready to bring some forward, let's encourage them to do that. I don't think this committee or the council ever required them to go back and forth like that. That just sort of happened that way. Mm-hmm. But if your point is, you know, should anyone perceive that as a sort of required back and forth, I would say absolutely not. Let's encourage them to get to recommendations and take them as far as they're comfortable. If they want to ask for some input from CDC or full council, I wouldn't preclude that. I wouldn't say you can't. You have to bring us, you know, but I would encourage them, no, go as far as you're willing to. The other thing I'd point out is the Planning Commission does have a council liaison there that can also, usually I would think, give them a sense of the council. I believe that the mayor often attends so they can get a sense of the administration point of view. So if what you're saying is, can we encourage them to go faster? I would say absolutely. I think if we think we need sort of a sort of a process, I would say, I don't think we have one now, and I don't think we need one, but let's just encourage them to go faster.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Lassay.
Yeah, the process wasn't, trying to be diplomatic about it. The process was essentially drawn out over months for various issues to populate an agenda. It didn't need to do that. I think that was something that was more about the appearance of due process than an actual necessity to go through and go through a whole bunch of research and then ask council and then that sort of thing. And I think mostly I think the involvement with council during a couple of those processes, whether it was the fence or the downtown relook, was mainly because council said, what's going on? Why is this taking so long? And I think that's really, no reason to not have planning commission be succinct and specific. Remembering that they are an advisory committee and commission. They are not a governing commission. That is the duly elected role of the council, and by extension this committee. So I think it's a matter of if there are things that we want to either assign to planning commission to dive into, or recommendations that the planning commission brings forward for us to consider. I don't think there's any problem with going forward with a process that can be more flexible and in I guess less formulaic and more evolutionary.
Okay. So since I am the liaison to the Planning Commission, would it be all right if I simply met with the chair of the Planning Commission, Commissioner Marusiak, and kind of explained kind of our discussion here, what we think would be a better way forward, sort of empowering the Planning Commission to go forth and to perhaps work a little bit faster, not to put too fine a point on it, without having to necessarily come to us. And another option perhaps would be to, if they want some feedback from the council, the chair could meet with me at some point as the liaison, just say, hey, do you think that this is kind of what the committee was going for? Do you think this represents what the council's looking for? Generally speaking, not specifically, do they have all the votes, obviously, but does that sound like another way that we could perhaps give them a tool in their toolbox rather than having to come back to the committee? Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so I vote aye. And by the way, I want to correct a misstatement
Yeah.
that I made a few minutes ago. The mayor is sometimes in attendance at Planning Commission, but I think the CD director is almost always in attendance and, obviously is connected to mayor and administration. So I think they've got, the point I was trying to make is I think they've got fantastic support from council and from administration. So let's encourage them. So I vote aye.
Okay, great. I don't know if it needs a vote, but yes, Mayor.
Okay, so I think sometimes when it comes back and forth, it's when there may not be clear direction. So as long as you have clear direction and the borders are defined, take it to Planning Commission and they should be able to work on it. Sometimes I think there's a discomfort level as to, is this what what council's looking for or administration? So I think having you as a liaison and working with them would be great. So.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Lassay.
Yeah, I think I don't have a problem with that. I just continue to caution that, as liaison and chair of the committee, you speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Not as a voice of the council. So be wary of that, because you can, having been the liaison, been on Planning Commission as you were, and the liaison for Planning Commission, it is very easy to fall into what does council think? And you can't think for the council. Just be careful.
Yeah, just sort of a best guess, I suppose.
I always looked at it as providing advisory. How do I say this? Advice in terms of what has been previously approved, instead of what might be agreed upon in the future. History tends to give you a good path forward, so I think you could use that as a guide.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Lissay's caution, but I think the Mayor's making a fantastic point. I would really encourage the liaison. What you can do is come back to this committee. It's just three of us. So it's not a, council quorum. And you can, I think, if you see them stumbling or concerned about, as the mayor put it, the guardrails or the boundaries, I can't remember which term, but I think that's just a great opportunity as a liaison to say, to come back to this committee and at least get the sense of the committee, and then take that back to them. Maybe that gives them some confidence to around areas they might be unsure of. So kind of help facilitate them getting where you're proposing, which is a faster process. So I think that'd be a great role for the liaison.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this item? Okay. Yes, Council Member Lissay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to raise my hand and follow proper protocol instead of just speaking up, although it is, it is a small group here. I from a workflow standpoint, I think you're on there. I think that's clearly good. I think where it gets harder is the conversation when you do have it with Planning Commission, and that goes probably, and I see it probably, it goes to the next discussion item in terms of the work programs and council priorities, because you can't, it's difficult to speak to what council priorities are unless council has given those priorities, and we've addressed some of them. So I think if the goal of this is to encourage Planning Commission to work efficiently, to feel as though they are empowered to bring things forward that are of interest to the community, I'm all for it. If it's for them to craft policy or direct activities to council that, hey, we think the community wants this, or we think the community needs that, I'm a little less enthusiastic about that, because that's the council's role.
Yeah, I think that definitely will go into the next thing. Actually, I just realized I didn't ask staff if they had any other comments on this item.
Chair Johnson, yeah, I was just gonna point out that this is a wonderful discussion, and it's the way that I would kind of put my perspective on it would be just what is the expectation of the Planning Commission and the commissioners themselves? I mean, building up their expectation for how work flows, what is the work, and all of that will just continue to make this legislative process go more smoothly in the future, and that they could replicate that and understand it is kind of the name of the game.
All right. If there's nothing else on that item, then we'll move on to the work programs and council priorities. So I sent out an email that listed sort of what my interests were in having us work on things moving forward. This was a while back. Oh boy, when did I send that? Let's see if I can find the date.
August 15th was the date of the committee meeting. Your email, no, is that it?
Oh, I think that it was 8/12 was the date of my email.
Like that, yeah.
I can just forward it. I think that's everyone. Okay, so that listed out what my interests were. Those are not all necessarily things, it's a long list that I think that we should go to, right now, that we should sign all that work to the planning commission. I think that we should definitely pick a couple off of there to prioritize, because if you try to do everything, usually nothing ends up getting done. And I did roughly align those in order of my priorities, so we can kind of pick from the top the ones that we think would be most useful. But not only from my list, of course, I also want to hear from my fellow committee members what their priorities would be. Council member Lassay also sent a follow-up. I can find that.
If you want, I can just respond to the email you just sent out,
Yeah, that would work.
those items.
Just one moment.
There you go. The other three that I had.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of overlap, which I think is good. So I don't want to put the mayor pro tem on the spot, but if you had anything in particular from this list that you either agreed with or something you think that's missing, yeah, we'd love to hear. You don't have to say right now, of course, but
Well, no,
yeah, go
yeah, I
ahead.
would just say both of these lists look fantastic to me. There was one comment that I didn't fully follow. I think some of these items don't look like planning commission items at all to me. Some of them absolutely could be. But I would say my number one priority is actually affordable or attainable housing, and some plan around trying to address that need in the city. I think we have a lot of resources that we've sort of made available. We have property that we own. We have funding that we've put in place but haven't committed how it'll be used yet. Then there are a whole bunch of other things that are available to us, all kinds of incentives that we can provide, all kinds of things we can do to try and encourage or almost even partner with, if you will, entities that might be willing to put up attainable housing in our city. So I would really like to see us do something. I think it's one of those things where there's so much that can be done that it can just be overwhelming. My point of view has been for several years that we need to just pick some highly, I don't know if likely is the word, or highly doable for our community kind of things, and then try and move on them. So I'd really like to see us make progress in that area. That would be my number one priority, but everything else on these lists, both lists look, I'm completely supportive of.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think definitely a discussion around what it means to create an affordable housing plan or how to tackle this is a big discussion that I wonder if it needs to start here for us to clarify directions to the planning commission rather than saying, hey, planning commission, come up with an affordable housing plan. I don't know. That's just sort of my thought. Yeah, Councilmember Lassay.
Yeah, I'm going to concur with Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew that the number one item should in my mind top three should be affordable housing, attainable housing, and workforce housing. And if that makes, put them all together, and that's your top three every single time. I think that's something though that I think this committee needs to tackle in terms of what that means. We do have a number of things going on in the background around affordable housing and I'm forgetting that exact phrase that it's referred to it, but the use study or the correct me please, the survey.
The housing needs assessment.
Thank you. I knew it was assessment was what I was coming up with. I couldn't come up with that word. So I think that needs to run its course, and then we can start addressing that at a committee level. One of the items I brought up was the multiple codes and processes that we currently have ongoing in Snoqualmie. With the completion of SR1 and the soon to be completed SR2, and then you've got the business park, and then you've got the downtown historic zone, which is part of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code. You essentially have folks that want to come to Snoqualmie, and maybe they want to do a development, or maybe they just want to buy a shop and remodel it, and they have no idea what to do because we're working off of 3 or potentially 4 different documents. Something for the planning commission that would be, I feel that would be a task for the planning commission to disseminate those documents. And it's most cities, when they do a plan development, when that development is complete and no longer subject to new development, or maybe there's just a very small fraction remaining, they no longer follow a development agreement. They move away from that and they incorporate those things into their municipal code. I think we are at that point for sure in terms of Snoqualmie Ridge. We're probably past it in most cases as well, from what I've read and what I've experienced in other jurisdictions. So I think that's something that could be very easily an item for the planning commission to tackle, and to come back and say, okay, here's how we're going to merge these documents, and here's how the municipal code should be updated, and incorporate that into the works there. So, but again, affordable housing is always going to be number 1 on my list.
Yeah. I actually wanted to comment one thing on that, or at least clarify. So outside of Snoqualmie Ridge, we have zoning, whereas in Snoqualmie Ridge, it's, if you include the business park, I guess it's 2 zones. So in order to merge those multiple codes, this is just a clarifying question. Would we have to zone Snoqualmie Ridge in order to do that? Or is there a different process? Because I don't know. Yeah, like that clarified. Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
So in broad terms, what we would be looking to do would be to apply zoning designations likely to the different areas of Snoqualmie Ridge. So for example, we may have 2 or 3 or 4 different residential zones, depending on, the density. For example, in the neighborhood center, there is some higher density residential development versus if you're out on Fairway, for example, there's some lower density residential development. Certainly have commercial areas. So that just in very broad terms, you'd be looking to do that. You'd probably be looking to incorporate to a certain extent, or maybe to a large extent, the existing Snoqualmie Ridge development standards and convert that into zoning standards, which would then live in the zoning code. So, but that's just one approach. There are some other ways you could do it. You could just try to, if you will, shoehorn everything into the city's existing zoning is another potential way. So it's a large discussion. Issaquah went through this somewhat recently when they terminated the Issaquah Highlands development agreement and plans, and so there's absolutely precedent for doing this. Issaquah has some other issues because they had vacant parcels still left there that has caused them some ongoing issues over time. We don't have that issue here, fortunately. So it's absolutely doable, and I think as one council member pointed out, this is something the planning commission could absolutely help out on.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so I completely agree with all that. The one thing I'd say is on affordable housing, I don't think that's something that we should ask the planning commission to take on. That is a huge task, and it's I think that we, as the elected council members and along with administration should get into this. I think one of my great disappointments for my 5 years on the council is how little progress we've made on this particular topic. We've made great progress on many other topics that are important to me, but this has always been in my top 3 priorities, top 4 priorities. I just think in my time in the council, we've made little progress, and I think it's a great opportunity to really make some progress on this and make a difference. So rather than that going to, well, especially with the last thing we talked about, there's only so much capacity that the planning commission has anyway. But I think this is something that that council committees or council should really start attacking now, absolutely together with administration on this. This is a lot of work. We need a lot of help and guidance from staff, but I think we should go after this. I also think that there's a lot of interest from council members, all of the council members, frankly, to really get in and help with this, to put in time. And I'd really like to see us really go after this. Not the least of whom is sitting to my right and seems to have quite a bit of interest and quite a bit of knowledge and quite a bit of connections. I'd really like to see us go after this topic hard and not as we have in the past, which is we allowed it to be too big and we kind of drowned in it. I think we've got to just narrow it and then go after it. There's only so much a city our size can do. Let's get after that and go after things we're likely to be able to do, not really inventive things that we may never pull off.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor.
Sorry. So do you see the affordable housing being addressed in the CD committee
I think that is
versus establishing a task force that focuses in totally on that?
yeah, thanks for that question. I kind of had the same question to our committee. Do we want to I mean, it's really actually more a question, I think, perhaps for the whole council would be, do we want to form a separate committee to focus on affordable housing or not? I don't think that's something that just the 3 of us should do. And then the alternative would be to do it here. What does the committee think about that? Sorry, Councilmember Lassay, I saw your hand was up as well. Can you address this first and then I'll come back to you for the other thing?
No, that was actually, you're on the same path of what I was gonna mention.
Okay.
And the mayor brought up very concisely that here's what I've always thought about this, and I being we were kind of in a middle ground here the last year or so of where we were headed. I think a task force is the best way to go, that reports to the committee. And the reason I say it that way is that, and I probably need city attorney advice on this, but I think if we appoint a task force that could include council members, those council members can create, that are on the task force can go forward with some in-depth research and knowledge, and not naming anyone that's in the room that has that sort of knowledge that would be ideal for maybe being the chair of that task force. But then the committee then has the opportunity to then address it as it has been addressed in the past through then the starting point as it goes back up into council. So I think there's an opportunity to really get a lot of involvement. But I also will echo what Councilmember Mayhew said. We don't want this to languish and go on down a path that it hasn't before, where it got to be such a big endeavor that we couldn't figure out what to do. And really it was a matter, I think, simple things, directives that can encourage investment in affordable housing, that can provide incentives for folks to pursue affordable housing, and then move that direction. But I think a task force is a good way to go.
Can I just ask a follow-up clarifying question? By a task force, you mean it would include council, but also other members of the community. So say 1 or 2 members of the council and then other members of the community. Is that what you're suggesting?
In my mind, I think yes.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's overstepping the idea. Are we creating because the task force is connected to the community development committee and we're having council members on the task force, does that create basically a ad hoc committee of more than 3 council members?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I'm not at all in favor of that idea. Look, there's elected council members. Let's do our job. The notion that we're gonna, I don't take unelected individuals and put like, this is a council job. Let's get on with it. If that council committee, that's why I didn't understand the term task force. Our rules of procedure allow for council committees. I'm entirely supportive of a council committee that will just focus on affordable housing and workforce housing and attainable housing. But should be a council committee. And if they seek public input, fantastic. But that's the model. I think this other thing isn't like any model that I've ever heard of, and certainly isn't something our rules of procedure allow for. So I don't know why we go that path. It's confusing to me. Let's get council members focused on it. Let's get them doing it. The biggest thing I worry about is how much we're asking of staff. Historically, staff has just really struggled. We don't have a giant community development staff. This is a big lift, and they've really struggled to have the time when we're also, throwing all other kinds of community development tasks their way. They've got a planning commission to support. We just talked about some other things that this committee might be focused on. So I think we have to be, one of the topics that's come up in the past is, should we try to get in some help, contract help or other kind of help to help staff support a real focused effort on affordable housing? So I'd like to see us offer that to staff and fund that if they would find that useful. But I think let's go after this, but let's be mindful of what staff can support, and let's set up a realistic timeframe. And then to the extent we need to prioritize, so if we're asking them to work on this as first priority, and there's, we need to be mindful of how many things we're asking them to do, so they don't have, lack of clarity on prioritization. So let's prioritize it. Let's put a committee on it. And let's ask for timeframes, and let's fund what staff needs to support it. That would be my point of view.
Thank you. Yes, community development director.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would just like to point out just a few observations. First of all, we do have a consultant team on board right now, like was mentioned, to do a housing needs analysis. That's the first step towards working on the housing element part of the comp plan that will be adopted in December of 2024. And as a second step to that housing needs analysis is the housing strategy plan. So that needs analysis informs a strategy, which will be coming back to the council, to the CD committee and the council as a whole. All those things work in harmony. At the base of all of that is just the planning commission's work on the housing element, getting into the goals and policies of what are the goals and policies of the city, how are they going to be reflected in the housing element of the comprehensive plan. And just as another side note, yes, the community development department is small, and our tasks and our priorities are administered by the council. But I did set up a meeting with Arch, a coalition for housing, to meet with them to find out more about what they do, more about their interest in the valley, more of their interest in Snoqualmie. If I look at their portfolio right now online, I mean, they've got upward of 13 projects, for example, in Issaquah that support AMI from anywhere from 30 to 80%. They might be someone that we want to consider having more of a conversation with in the future about, what's their availability to serve cities like Snoqualmie, what would it cost? Could they possibly contribute, like they're doing for Issaquah or Bellevue or Bothell, something to think about.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so we've thought about that, spent a lot of time with Arch. Arch is not going to spend a penny in Snoqualmie. It's not going to happen. We're non-contiguous UGA. Arch is very focused on transit oriented development, which is fantastic. I think they're doing great work. They're never going to spend a penny in Snoqualmie. We also, there's another similar organization to Arch, which is functioning in South King County, which also you could talk to, but it's going to be the same answer. We have a very unique situation here with the non-contiguous UGA and the complete lack of, well, almost complete lack of transit. So it's a unique challenge. So far in my experience, when we've tried to go after this, that just burns up a lot of time and we never get to an outcome. I think we've got to try to build off of what we've already learned and really try to drive to outcomes. Like I say, if we've been down this path with Arch, we're not going to get anywhere with Arch, at least. I mean, granted, you can always ask again, but when you look at how they prioritize projects they work on, we're just never going to meet their criteria out here in the non-contiguous UGA.
Community Development Director, did you have?
Was that just the other coalition? Was that SHAPE in South King County? I mean, South Pierce County?
Seed.
Si-
Seed.
Either one of those sounds right. Sorry.
Oh.
But maybe it's
SHAPE is new.
something like that. Yeah.
What was the last point of discussion the council had with Arch, and has there been any change in Arch since the last discussion? Like
Yeah, probably about 3 years ago, we did discussion, we kind of pinged them. We had some, these were, not real negotiations or anything like that. It was just discussions and it just became clear. Yeah, this is not a path. They would be very happy. They would love to add us to their coalition, take our money, and it won't be spent in Snoqualmie. So that's what just sort of became clear. And we just realized their focus on transit oriented development just isn't going to work here. Plus the non-contiguous UGA aspect of it. So we're really unique. The sort of the conclusion was we're going to have to grow something here. Now, there's all other kinds of similar paths. Can we find developers like the developer, not the specific one, but developers like the one that did the apartment, Panorama Apartments. Organizations like that are where we maybe can find some real success. So the question is, can we put together a package of whether it's tax incentives, funding from the city, maybe even some property contributions, are there things that we can do to help make a project become feasible to attract someone like that? Seemed to be the sort of the path that we could go on. The whole and there was a discussion, well, what can we afford to do on our own? Answer is very little. Not nothing, but very little. But leveraging the resources we have available by finding partners. I mean, I think the path of finding partners is absolutely the path that we need to be on. It just didn't turn out to seem like Arch and gosh, I wish I could remember their name. Sorry. I'm going to remember the minute I walk out the door, but it's easy enough to look out. It's South King. Anyway, that we just didn't fit their profile for what they were trying to do. Yeah, but that's the path. Find who we can partner with to really make stuff like this happen. Organizations can then leverage, as Panorama did, maybe HUD funding and other kind of financing, and try to put together the biggest leverage we can get from the resources that we have.
All right. So yeah, this is the kind of of narrowing of scope that we need to figure out, right? Okay. I believe that Councilmember Watton has something. Was that a hand? Okay. I just want to make sure really quick about process procedures.
Point of order.
Yes.
Councilmember Watton is not a member of the committee. And while this has been noticed as committee of the whole, it's so he can attend, not participate.
Okay.
I think we have to be careful for not expanding the committee.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to ask for just a little bit of guidance on that. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
So my understanding of how we're allowed to operate this and how we in fact have operated this is that we don't allow council members who are not committee members to participate in debate on a matter in front of the committee. But we do regularly allow them to make comments similar to how any member of the public would be allowed to make comments. I would just observe that I don't think we're in a debate right now. So as long as we're following that precedent and that kind of guidance, I think taking comments from other council members might be okay, but in the same manner that you might open it up to members of the public.
And I just would then caution Councilmember Watton to make a comment. Don't participate in a debate.
Thank you. It looked like one of our city legal staff might have had something to add. Yes, go ahead.
Sure, no, I just wanted to say that exactly, that Councilmember Watton can participate to the same extent as a member of the public.
All right, thank you. All right, Councilmember Watton.
So thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So in the past, the mayor has, I believe the mayor has had special task force that they've been able to appoint. And my only reference is Solarize Snoqualmie, which was a separate citizen sort of led effort. And it was kind of a subset of either community development or the EDC. And there are a number of people that actually are experts in affordable housing who live in Snoqualmie, who might be able to add to the discussion. And I would just kind of help encourage the committee's consideration of a task force where you can bring in those people. And I can, if you look at the agenda for the upcoming Snoqualmie Valley Housing Summit, we have Cirque Living, and that person happens to be a Snoqualmie resident. Slightly outside of our bounds is Oldavia. They're also a Snoqualmie area resident, as well as one of the bankers from a competitive bank to mine that could all serve in those capacities to help bring some additional resources, as well as from the Economic Development Commission. There's some interest there. So I just kind of put that out for consideration. While we could have one or two council members, not only from Snoqualmie, but also potentially North Bend, as well as the tribe, Snoqualmie tribe. They have an affordable housing person that is Angelina Halverstadt, who would be very interested in assisting if that's of interest. And it's a good way of kind of being able to help identify other opportunities going forward in other nonprofits that might be interested in assisting.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, it occurs to me that my prior comments might have not been understood by everyone. Just to be clear, I'm saying it is the council's responsibility. We were elected to do things like this. Many of us ran specifically on doing something around affordable housing, including myself. And it's time for us to step up and do that's not the way to say it. We've been working very hard on this, many of us council members, but it is time to move another step forward. And we must take that responsibility. It should be a council committee. Now, I think the point that Councilmember Watton was making is, holy smokes, let's not fail to understand we have fantastic resources in our community. Absolutely, we should take advantage of those. So our committee can ask for all kinds of help, but let's not confuse who votes at council meetings to commit funds, to commit actions. And let's get a group of council members who are going to take that responsibility, work with all of those people to bring back proposals. But I am not in favor of some diffused responsibility. That's what we, in my view, what we've been doing so far. Task council members who are willing to, I think there are plenty willing to put up their hand. Let's ask them to go lead this effort together with the mayor and with administration, and let's ask them to be responsible to council for outcomes. And yes, involve all the members of the community that we have who would love to help us accomplish something here. That's my point.
Thank you. Councilmember Lissay.
Yeah, I think it was misconstrued as if I was saying I was saying that as a task force, we could include the public, but it really was as informative, not as decision makers. I think that's important because I too ran very specifically on affordable housing twice. And I don't feel like, again, got to walk carefully because I'm not supposed to criticize past councils, but I don't think we did our job very well. I don't think we really pushed forward as hard as we should have. I don't think we really truly got to the issue at hand, which is finding available, ways to provide housing for our workforce to be able to work and live in the community that they're involved in. And that goes to, the lack of transportation. It goes to the unavailable, housing units. It goes to a number of issues in that sense. So yes, while I don't disagree that it's council members need to take on the responsibility that we've been tasked with as council members and move this another step forward, hopefully 2 or 3 steps forward. But we do need to engage the community who are experts in knowing our community deeper than we do and take that information to make those decisions.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, just one quick additional point. One of the points that Councilmember Watton made, which I think is tremendously important, is he pointed out collaboration with nearby cities in the same kind of area in the Upper Valley here, specifically North Bend. And he mentioned the tribe, and we should absolutely be reaching out and trying to partner with them. However, we should be moving forward ourselves, not waiting, trying to find those who will help us, advise us, and participate with us, but we should be moving forward.
Yeah, I was going to try to offer what Mayor Pro Tem said as a compromise. Then he said it, and then Councilmember Lissay basically sounds like he agrees. So it sounds like we're getting pretty close to a consensus here. Mayor, did you have something to add?
Well, go ahead with your consensus and then
Okay.
I have a starting point.
Okay, what it sounds like then is that the interest here is to have a council committee. That would not be this committee, it would be another committee that would be advised by members of the community that are deeply involved in the issues related to housing. I am curious what the process is for that. Do we need to get confirmation from the full council to create that committee? So does this need to be like an agenda bill at our next council meeting? Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
So council committees are appointed by the Mayor Pro Tem, confirmed by the council. We could do that anytime we want.
Okay.
To be honest, I'm a little confused about how we're using agenda bills now. It's been very different recently than it was before. I think it's used as a tracking mechanism. I don't fully understand it, but whatever makes staff's job easier, we should do that. But the point is we can move quickly on this. What I'd encourage us to do, it sounds like the mayor may have some specific suggestions how to move forward, but I would say let's bring this to the council at the next council meeting. And then let's find out council members who are interested, and then let's get this appointed off the ground and moving, subject to whatever recommendations the mayor has here.
So do you want this added to the CD portion where you have it as a discussion?
Yeah, I think so. So we would essentially, if I'm understanding, we would be asking the council to agree on the formation of the committee. The Mayor Pro Tem would then make, I suppose, what are nominations that would then be affirmed at the following council meeting for who would fill those positions? Thanks. Just trying to clarify the process. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, we can sort of do it in whatever order we like, but I would say the only reason to wait is if we want to allow some time for council members to make their interest known. But we can move as fast as we want as a council. But that would be the one thing I'd say is we got 7 council members. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them that know about this conversation right now. So it might be, it might be fair to let the others know what we're kind of thinking so they can make their interest known. But then I would say, let's get going.
And
Yes, Mayor.
I was just going to start with, I think everyone here should try to attend the Affordable Housing Summit, because that would be a good baseline. You're going to learn a lot about, as you mentioned, we have experts from residents in the city, but then also some of the housing groups or companies will be there as well. So going there and learning about it, and then from there, starting your council committee.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Lissay.
Yeah, I'm incredibly biased in this statement, and I'm going to tell you up front that I am, but you're going to hear at the Housing Summit from Susan Gillespie of Olduvai, which is one of my clients in the business world. And they've developed a unique way of looking at housing, not from a big monstrous footprint, but to working in smaller chunks and realizing that the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the whole. When you can do multiple housing opportunities, bring through, small lots with small number of units, but you do it multiple times. It's a bit different than looking at one of these groups that want to buy, 50 units or 100 units or 200 units and try to conglomerate. I'm going to use that. It's probably a new word. I'm going to use it though. Into a big sort of thing. But when you can do 4 units or 5 units or 10 units and do that quickly and do it efficiently and do it with pride towards home, either ownership or living in an environment where somebody you can really fill a space. It's a big thing. So I'm unfortunately going to be in Denver speaking about a similar topic, but I would also encourage everyone to go to the housing summit if they're available.
Thank you. That is going to provide for a segue in just a moment, but I'll go to Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, just point of information. When is that?
September 22nd, it's 1 to 4 p.m.
I believe it's being held at
The North Bend Theater.
Oh.
Popcorn.
And what was the time again?
1 to 4 p.m.
That wasn't to diminish the other folks that will be involved in the event by any means. Everyone that's in that event is bringing valuable information from housing to lending to job opportunities and growth and all the things that are really important in the big scheme of housing. I only wanted to mention that there are more ways to do this than a large group that wants to build large units of housing.
Thank you.
They don't make the numbers only work from that perspective because they work at every level.
So on that very topic, it was another item on my list of things I would love for us to do. It was second on my list because I think it actually does get to affordable housing, even though I technically separated it out because it's a zoning thing, that I think that we have the ability and capacity to do now. And it's possible that staff could just tell me that I'm wrong, but in our zoning code, we have R1 zoning, and R1 is widely used in the United States as a way to designate housing that is single family homes on lots. So you have a lot, you're allowed to have one building, maybe with like a detached garage or something, but you have one home on the lot, one family is intended to live there. And I don't believe that our code has any exemptions to that. But what a lot of cities are doing Spokane most recently is I'm not sure which way they went, if they just eliminated the R1 zoning or if they just changed it. We could find that out for sure, but so essentially changing it to allow for duplexes and fourplexes on those single family lots. It's not forcing someone to do that, but if someone wants to convert their house into a duplex or a fourplex, that they are allowed to do so. And then another thing that's kind of related to that, that helps with walkability and those kinds of issues, is to also allow for small scale retail in one of those kinds of units within those zones. And that's what really opens up the possibility for corner stores that seem to be a missing thing from the past, that most people have a fond memory of, you know, walking down to the corner store, you get yourself an ice cream on a hot day. They're very hard to find, largely because they're just flat out illegal in much of the US. And I believe that our R1 zoning is very similar to that. And I think that that I am just skeptical that that is a necessary zone in modern day cities. It feels like sort of a relic of the past, when we had an almost infinite amount of area in the United States to just keep building our cities. And then we ran out of space to keep building. And now we have to do something different. So I think that relooking at R1 zoning is something that the Planning Commission could do. I don't think that there's any real need for holdup, other than just we have other things that they're looking at as well. So that's something that I would like for them to do, is to look at essentially R1 zoning. And if I am right about how it's written for our code, allowing for duplexes, fourplexes, and small scale retail. Thoughts on that? Yes, Mayor.
So I have run that past a developer, and they stated that the small markets will not make enough money to be sustainable. So what they need is something else, like if there's a gas station tied to it, or something else that brings in the revenue, than just the corner small markets. But
Yeah, it probably would depend a lot on the rent and who owns it, because we know that rents are high in Snoqualmie, especially for small businesses. So yeah, I definitely hear that concern. But also, once again, it doesn't mean that you don't disallow it. If someone wants to do it, then why would we forbid them from doing it, I guess would be the question. Yes, Councilmember Lassay.
Yeah, having spent a lot of my career also working on planning projects, I think there's a tread carefully moment here, because you're looking at it as a, and I don't think you intended this, I'm not trying to say you did, but looking at it as a carte blanche.
As
know,
I'm sorry. Can you
as
say
a carte blanche redo of the R1 zoning, I think, is a dangerous path. I think what needs to be, I think you got to look at your goals, and what the objective would be. If we're trying to provide some density to our neighborhoods to allow for housing growth that could then potentially support a little corner of retail activity, you got to look at where that makes sense, because there's a lot of places that it doesn't make sense. And I don't particularly know if that makes sense for Snoqualmie Ridge, and that you're going to do that, and you're going to put a a little mini mart next to $1 million house. I think you're treading down a path that could be very difficult to follow. But I think the idea of looking at where we could create synergies in the community, and where those are around the transit locations, and where we do have bus stops, and where we do have activity that could create some density to do a duplex or a fourplex sort of conversion, that still, follows, I guess, some adherence to the CC&Rs that are existent and are a part of the Snoqualmie Ridge development. But it doesn't have to necessarily be only the ridge. It could, we oftentimes look at where do we want to put things, and zero in on that. But some other council members may remember, and Joe, you may remember yourself, the form-based zoning effort we did in downtown to try to bring some additional opportunities to parts of Snoqualmie in near the historic district to allow some different uses, to bring in accessory dwelling units and to provide some front door activities that are more than what you'd normally find in a traditional R1 zoning. So I think there's ways to do that and investigate it, but I think I'm not sure I'm on board with just completely relooking at R1 across the board.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, my understanding is there's a great desire for one of these very near to Hoff Park. I can't remember the particular location that might be in mind. But seriously, I think if what we're talking about is, hey, let's look at the topic, which is increased density, re-looking at areas in the city where we might reconsider some higher density goals, possibly some retail goals. I think if we sort of frame it up in that manner without sort of supposing how we might go about that, there are many ways that I think our planning staff could talk about achieving that kind of goal and where to look and so on. Maybe asking planning commission to just have a rethink about those topics of density and possible, I think, and then see what they come up with. I think that I don't see how that wouldn't be a worthwhile thing to ask them to do. Although let's be careful about prioritization again. There's only, let's not give them 5 things and not tell them which priorities. But I think that's sort of similar to what Councilmember Lassay was saying, but he has more experience in this area. So let's, subject to his correcting me, I'm thinking maybe we ask him to look at something like that. I think would be fine.
Okay. So I think that what we could do then is perhaps hold off on that just a little bit, because we may have some higher priorities for the planning commission in the short term then. And, down the road, we'll kind of put that in the parking lot, if that makes sense. Does that sound reasonable? Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, there was one other thing for the planning commission that it could be parking lot if we feel like we've already given them too much. But I think that there's some interest from the council and probably the planning commission too, to relook at the historical design review board and what the regulations are, and try to tighten up some of the language where it says, that so it's such a building may do this, or clarifying really specifically, or at least better than what it already is, what the purpose is and what the uses of contributing buildings in the code. It's something that I've seen a lot of people on the planning commission and the council struggle with understanding. So just making sure that that's really clear in the code, what a contributing building is and how it's supposed to be used when making decisions. Does that make sense? Yeah, and then also just maybe tightening up some of the mays and turning some of them into shalls, and just a few other little things along those lines. I'm going to go to Mr. Rogers first. Yeah.
Councilor on sales has his hand up if you want to hear from him first, but
I'll go ahead. Go ahead, Jason.
okay. Just briefly, to slight preview of coming attractions, we do have some procedural code amendments related to the historic districts, how that process works coming forward, probably pretty soon. Those ones are not going to touch the substantive provisions of the design standards, for lack of a better term. That would be a bigger lift. Of course, you'll have to fit that into the other priorities the council is going to have for the planning commission's work program.
Councilmember Lassay.
Yeah, so I think that's a good one. I again want to make sure we're cognizant of priorities. And the reason I think it's good is because I run across this a lot too, is where someone spends a lot of time defining what a contributing building is. And by spending all their time defining the contributing building, you lose track of what a non-contributing building is. And you get in this kind of nowhere zone. So I think it's important for us to be clear that you almost have to, you're almost better off defining what something isn't than trying to define what something is. And so I think that's definitely a task clearly with the advice of the community development director and the community development staff. But that would be something the planning commission could very easily have on their plate at some point.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I would just say I agree with your observations on concerns about how that language is written right now. I would just say this is an area of our municipal code that is that many residents get very, very emotional about. And the discussion often has a lot to do with emotions as opposed to exactly what is in fact being proposed or considered. And working through that is very tough on the community. It's very tough on the planning commission members. It's very time consuming. I'm not saying that that's a reason not to do it. I'm just saying be aware that this is in my experience, asking to relook at the historic design review board, its responsibilities and the code sections that guide them, I think is it's a big ask. That's what I'm trying to say. And so again, back to priorities, let's just be very mindful if we do ask them to do this, how big an ask we're actually making in terms of time commitment.
Yeah, number 1, 2, and 3 is affordable housing, and affordable housing.
All right. So that could be another good parking lot item. All right. That was all of mine that I wanted to hit. Were there any other items that we wanted to bring forth right now? Okay, that's good because we're running out of time anyway. All right. That takes us to number 5, which is a discussion of meeting time and frequency. The request was for us to look at the number of times that both our committee and the planning commission meet, which is currently twice a month. And community development director, was there anything else on that, or is it basically just the frequency of the meetings?
The only other component to that would be if the planning commissioners had a desire to move their meeting time up.
That's right, up to 7, right? Yeah. Okay. So I've some initial thoughts is that I'm afraid that if we removed a meeting from the planning commission's calendar, that would give them only 12 meetings a year, which would again limit how much work they could get done. I realize that of course we have to balance that with how much time staff spends on getting things prepared for them. So that's kind of the balancing act. I would lean toward keeping the calendar the way it is, and if a meeting needs to be canceled, then we can approach that as needed. But I'd love to hear from the rest of the committee their thoughts on that. Councilmember Lassay.
Yeah, I think it's a scheduling thing. I think you're up against timing, a desire to have an hour and a half for committee meetings so we can get through everything. We've just had an hour and 20 minutes of really good conversation that will be the baseline for us moving forward on some stuff that's really important. How do you do that and still move meetings around? I think that's always been the challenge. I know that the Mayor Pro Tem has put a lot of effort and energy into this problem. I guess we'll call it a problem of timing. And it's not easy because it's hard to fit things in. And I don't know if that's a matter of, for a while we did 1 hour meetings, then we went to an hour and a half, sometimes meetings end quickly. Some committees are more fact-based or agenda bill based, and some committees like this one are more ideological based. And so it's hard to determine what takes precedent. So I'm not answering any of the questions. I'm not bringing up anything new that you guys don't know. But I would like to. I don't think changing the frequency really fixes anything. Because it actually probably slows everything down, pushes things out. Does less than more. But maybe it's an hour and 15 minutes instead of an hour and 30 minutes. Are we able to accomplish that to help address some of those the timing issues of when committee meetings and commission meetings start? That's just my random thoughts on a Tuesday afternoon.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just point out when I joined the council committees were spread over 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We condensed that to 2 days, knowing that we were then putting some tight limits on the committees, but we wanted to make sure that we left enough time for them to do their work. I think the notion of not meeting as often, we already get so little done. The goal is not to do even less, in my view, it's to do more, and meeting less is not going to result in us doing more. I think Councilmember Lissay made a great point. Take tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting wasn't about an agenda bill. It was about trying to reach agreement on some ways forward on some very big issues. I think that's exactly what we were elected to come grapple with. So I think we need to keep doing that. I think the Planning Commission at the time, the particular members on the Planning Commission wanted to continue meeting on Monday. And so that's why the particular schedule we've got. We only do an hour for Public Safety Committee. We leave an hour and a half for this committee. That's, as Councilman Lissay said, kind of due to the nature of how those committees, the kind of work they do and the amount of time they typically seem to need. But there's no reason for Planning Commission to have to be on a Monday. There are other days available. We could have a third day. I know it was what we did prior to just a few years ago. I think the notion of doing less meetings, look, we already have a problem. The Planning Commission, when things come in front of them, they're not able to get through them timely. The council is regularly squeezed on the amount of time because we have legal requirements for how long the city can take with a topic. The more time the Planning Commission takes with it, the less time the council can take with it. We have that problem already. We're just going to exacerbate the problems we already have if we meet less often. I don't think that's the solution. Now, looking at timing, which days, when people say, look, oh, I have to meet on Monday, I'm not willing to meet any other day of the week, like we've tried to work around that, but if the Planning Commission's preference at the time was we would rather meet on a Monday at 7:30 than another day at an earlier time. That was their preference. So if they have a different preference now, let's hear that, and let's think about how we time our committees. We try to make it so staff, we reduce the amount of staff burden in the evenings. We try to reduce the amount of time on council member burden. So we can relook at all that, but I don't think that the solution is less meetings to do an even slower job at things we're already not doing well.
Did staff have any thoughts? Okay. Oh, Mr. Rogers, yes.
Sorry, just I guess generally agreeing with the Mayor Pro Tem. I know the Planning Commission's meeting schedule has come up in the past, and the consensus, of course, was to stay on Monday evenings. There, as the chair has pointed out, there are a number of new planning commissioners now, so the discussion could be had as to maybe another date works. We of course have to balance that with the staff impact, because right now, of course, you see the director and I here tonight, and we'll be here later for the Planning Commission meeting. Adding another night, certainly has impacts on us. We we both have lives too, so it's not a just go for it thing. The other thing that has happened, of course, is, as you point out, Mayor Pro Tem, the public safety meeting, which used to begin earlier in the afternoon, even after consolidating the council committees on 2 days. That meeting has over time migrated, so to speak, from, I believe they start at 4 or 4:30 to now they start at 5, and they only have an hour now. So that pushed CD committee back that extra 30 minutes, which this meeting used to start at 5:30. I'm not going to suggest the council change your committee meeting times. That's certainly up to you to do. But to your point, I think Mayor Pro Tem, trying to find sufficient time for not just this committee, but all the council committees to get their work done in an appropriate manner, I know is a huge challenge on an ongoing basis. But it does vary, sometimes F&A is going to have a bigger load, sometimes Parks and Public Works. So maybe to an extent, there's a way to, I don't know what the proper term here is. It's not a rebalancing so much as just taking a look at what are the workloads on the different committees, and is there a way potentially to shuffle some of that load around to create time on committees that do it? Because, from the consensus of this committee earlier, you're going to be looking to add this affordable housing committee. That's going to need to find a time to meet. That's going to require, as you pointed out rightly, a lot of time to get their work done because there's a lot to do there, and that has to fit in somewhere. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I know some council members who might be interested in participating in that committee might be interested in doing that in daylight hours. One of the things I saw is we have a Human Services Advisory Committee that has, throughout the time I've been on the council, met in the evenings. They're now having a daytime meeting. So, I think you're right. Maybe it's not rebalancing, although I like that word, but a relook at how we could, maybe, given the current makeup, let's just revisit the timings. I think that's totally in order, and see if we can improve the timing. But in terms of frequency, I think we need to stay with the frequency we have, but let's try and make that easier on staff, on commission members, council members. We can have a relook at that. Let's do that.
Councilmember Lissay.
Yeah, I'll just make this real quick because I think Councilor Mayhew said it. Daylight hours or even morning hours, I think, are something that these ad hoc committees and things can certainly benefit from, that don't take staff time away from the normal work hour of staff time. I say morning hours because it's not about too long from now. We're going to be at 8 o'clock in the morning. It'll still be dark. So. And I think I guess the last thing I'll add to for you, Chair Johnson, is, or however we go about appointing a committee for affordable housing, you're going to have 7 council members raising their hand line beyond that.
Great. Okay. Oh, there it is. So it sounds like what we're going to do is we'll keep the frequency as it is, but we'll let the Planning Commission consider alternative times. Days and times.
Then I think there's an idea of how about we, and I'll take this on, recanvass the council members regarding committee meeting times, and maybe we can make some shifts there that would help relieve some of the time pressure, and try and help with staff having evenings at home, which it seems that the city is intent on making sure that Mr. Rogers never sees an evening at home any day of the week. Yes. Maybe we could revise our outcomes.
Yeah, we could keep spreading it out. Got 5 days, right? All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, then that brings us to the end of our agenda. So we'll go ahead and adjourn there at 7:29. Thank you so much.